All right, just want to do a quick book review of a book that I read recently, which is Sons and Lovers by D.H. Lawrence. As you can see, the version that I have here is quite old. I have a sticker on it. I guess I bought it for $3 at Brattle Bookshop, which is a really nice used bookstore that I like to go to in Boston, right near the Boston Common. Particularly on nice days because they have an outdoors section, and I think the most expensive book you can purchase outside is like $5, and I've gotten a lot of classics for like $3, $2, even $1. Anyway, let's go on with the book. Yeah, I didn't really prepare anything to say. I just figured I'd ramble for a little bit about it. I'll be honest, overall, I did not enjoy it that much. I don't see myself going back to it in the future, unless somehow my mind changes. Going into reading this book, I had read some short stories by D.H. Lawrence, and so I had pretty high expectations. I know that he's a well received author, and this is supposed to be a classic, one of his best, if not his best work. I know he's written some other very well-known books, but yeah, I read some short stories that I liked. The Prussian Officer, I remember enjoying. Vin Ordinaire, I think I enjoyed. I've got a book of his short stories here, and I was just going through the titles of them, and I remember thoroughly enjoying several of them, but I couldn't remember exactly which ones were which. I'd have to go back to it. The Prussian Officer, I could remember that one without having to go back to this. England, My England, I think I remember enjoying that. One thing I remember about reading, I forget which short story it was, but he tended to repeat words a lot. In the short story that I remember from, the word was inert, I think, which is pretty interesting because I don't hear that being used so much. I guess it's related to inertia. So if something's inert, it's tending to be unchanging. Anyway, in this book, he uses that concept a lot, particularly with hate. And I saw another YouTuber mention that everybody hates everybody in this book, and they hate them one moment, and they're passionate and love them the next. So very repetitive. I think for some people it's a good thing, and others it's a bad thing. Obviously, the bad for that is pretty obvious. It's just repetitive, and it's not enjoyable for obvious reasons. But I guess in a Hemingway-esque way, short, simple sentences that are often repetitive, there's something about it that people like. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I do sometimes like that style of writing. I do like Hemingway and maybe Cormac McCarthy, like especially The Road. A lot of, not that he's repetitive, but just kind of less flowery language, although there's a lot of flowery language in this book. So overall, the writing, the style wasn't so much what I disliked. I actually do like the writing style quite a bit of D.H. Lawrence, which maybe is why I like the short stories a little bit more, because what I didn't find so interesting about this book was the plot, or lack thereof. There really isn't much of a plot overall. It's a very psychological novel, and there were parts of it that I thoroughly enjoyed, but overall I found it pretty dry in a lot of parts. It kind of just lagged on. It wasn't really going anywhere for me. There's a good amount of character development, sort of. The whole book is kind of revolving around like an Oedipus complex. Oedipus complex. I might have said that wrong. Oedipus. You know what I'm saying. I imagine that he was influenced by Sigmund Freud a lot in writing this book. never would have thought that, I would read a novel that would be so influenced by that concept. The For the first maybe third or quarter of the novel, the main character is definitely the wife of this family, the Morel family in a part of England. The father's a miner, so they live in like a mining town, and they don't have a lot of money. And this woman resents her husband. She kind of feels like she's been robbed of life, like she could have seen and done so much more. So she has children, and she starts to live vicariously, I guess you could say, through her son. She becomes very, very, very attached to them. And her second oldest son, who is her third oldest child, Paul, eventually becomes the main character of the story. And it really starts revolving around this man's relationship with women, two in particular, Clara and Miriam, and kind of how he's able to deal with having relationships with women, and also kind of balancing that with his strong, very, very even, in my opinion, kind of uncomfortably close relationship with his mother. And it doesn't seem possible in the end. Something went wrong in this family in a big way. I would like to get some other people's opinions on this. Was it the mother's fault? Was it the child's? What went so wrong? Because in my opinion, something went drastically wrong. I'm gonna spoil the book plot-wise a little bit. Although, even if you haven't read it, I don't think spoiling the plot is going to spoil the book, because this book is not very plot dependent. You can still get enjoyment out of it and read into the depth of it, I think, with already knowing what's going to happen going into it. So what was I going to say, basically? I do believe that something went terribly wrong, because this man's not able to... He's very unhappy for most of the book. He's not able to get his fulfillment out of a relationship, either with this first woman, Miriam, who's kind of like very spiritual and pure, and she's very religious, and he kind of plays her to a certain extent. He kind of, one day he's committed to her, the next day he's not, and then this other woman, Clara, who's like a feminist of the time. Takes part in the very early 20th century. It was written in 1913, so I imagine that right around then is when the era is supposed to be. She's like a radical person for that time. She's older than him, Clara, I'm still talking about, and they kind of have a fling together. She's also a married woman, so she's having an affair, but she's kind of separated from her husband. And I'm a little bit unsure of all these social dynamics. It was only written 100 years ago in England, so, an Anglo culture. I'm from America. I should be able to relate to it on a certain extent, but the way that marriage is discussed so openly, and this gentleman, I think, loses his virginity at the age of 26, and one day he'll say, are we gonna get married? And she'll bring it up too. And now I'm sorry. Now I'm going back to his relationship with Miriam, although marriage is also discussed with Clara. So very strange. And this whole time while he's going back and forth between these two women, his mother is not really happy about it at all. She's most happy when her sons are going out into the world and becoming successful. And William, I believe, was kind of into the business world a little bit more. And then her second son, Paul, was a painter. And the most fulfilled that I think you see the mother in the book is when she can be proud of her son Paul's paintings. Like, at one point they, win awards in this museum, and I think some rich person purchases them, and she goes to the museum where they're put on show every day, and she's super impressed, and it's almost like something that she accomplished, like they're an extension of her. She put them out into the world and they did this. But she won't let them go. She never accepts either Miriam or Clara. Miriam seems like a mother's dream for her son. I mean, she's such a pure, noble, innocent woman that I don't understand exactly the reason why the mother, Mrs. Morel, is so against her son being with her. And she never, I don't think, explicitly will say, I hate her or anything like that. Well, she does at one point, but Paul overhears it. In terms of talking with Paul, she just doesn't encourage him. She's very cold when he will talk to her about his relationships with women. And it's not just these two women. He'll come back from a pub from drinking whiskey, and he'll tell his mom about these girls he met, and she'll always be cold about it. It's like she's jealous and she doesn't want to share her son. And he will say some, in my opinion, cringeworthy things about how much he loves his mother and stuff like this. And at the very end of the book, his mother becomes sick, and he kind of quickens her passing, basically. You could say, kills her. And at the last few pages, it seems like he's going to move on in his life. I mean, he becomes very depressed for a while, and then it looks like he's going to move on. So maybe there's something I'm missing about this book, something that I'm not getting. I think the part after his mother's death could have been expanded on a little bit more, and the whole story leading up to that point, going back and forth with these women, and just being in his own head, and the psychology of it, it just got a little bit tedious for me. I think this book could have been half as long, and I would have enjoyed it a lot more. It's about 420 pages, my version, and yeah, I just found it at points to be extremely dry, and it was a little bit of a slog. But the writing was fabulous. The details of the countryside and landscapes and all that was really amazing. The usage of the accents at that time was pretty cool. So there's a lot good about this book, and I do respect D.H. Lawrence as a writer. I probably will go back to some of the short stories he wrote, but I would be very hesitant to reread Sons and Lovers one day, and I'd be hesitant even to dive into another long novel of his, because I just couldn't wait to get through this, to be honest. And maybe I'm missing something huge and valuable about this book, and if I am, please leave me a comment, and I'd love to hear another critical analysis of this novel. I think that's all for today. Thank you very much.